So
sorry, welcome back, everyone. Yeah, the time just ended. Sorry about that. I know that caught even me off guard, but thank you for the conversations. One of the things that I will ask is for each group to give a brief report out. And let's see if we can do this in the next half hour and try and bring this to a close on time. There were 3 groups. We probably should start with FX and new settlement models. Michael?
Oh, sorry, you muted me when I came back to the thing. Yes. It's okay. Right. So we basically, I'm sorry to say that Miller and I spent quite a long time talking to each other about how the foreign exchange stuff should work. The position we came round to is to say we need to workshop this to give it a good kicking and get the details sorted out. I have agreed to go back and do some more work, really to highlight and structure the issues that we discussed during this, and I will then make an open call for a workshop which interested parties can attend, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So that's on that side. We didn't really get that much time to talk about settlement, but we did get some potential improvements to the design, and particularly to the question that was asked about closing settlement batches. So I think we probably have a potential for an answer on that. I'll do a bit more work on that. And I think that's it. So this was Simon's question about closing a batch. I think that's it.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you, Jacques. By the way, sorry.
No, that's all right. I was looking for the comments to see if there's any comments. Excellent. I'm going to pass this. Is Greg there, Greg? For the fraud or anyone, I don't see. Oh, Greg had to jump. Anyone from the fraud who can give a quick report out? Okay. Then why don't we go to infrastructure? Tom and David?
Sure. All right. Well, I'll go to the same as what we were looking at. Here's what we changed and updated to. Level 1, no changes. Level 4 went away and has been reworded. Its main purpose, and now it becomes level 3. And the main purpose is to resemble production, provide a foundation for going to production. So I hope that takes into account David's cautions and from earlier. And then all of the discussion was really, or the bulk of the discussion was really around level 2. We tried various ways to define it. We probably needed some more business people in there. Although we had from Douglas, who's a fintech, that we had some input talking about an incubator function, hence they captured that. And then right at the end, just as we were getting bumped from the room, Simeon prompted some discussion that really the sandbox level 2 should be actually a sandbox. It could be an implementation that is actually up and running, i.e. what Lewis had for OSS Lab, but maybe it's an implementation of the IAC. And in fact, instead of this being a development job, it actually becomes an operations job and cost. And I think that would be a good that would be a good thing to bat around a little bit more. I know that Paul is setting up some meetings to discuss this and take this a little bit further over the next little while. I noticed that the meeting for next week has just gotten put off again. I think his time zone issues. And,
No,
and David,
too many people were declining, couldn't make it.
yeah. I can be flexible with time, Paul. I can help you out there. I'm used to working where, it's Seattle, Boston, and Bangalore and Adelaide. So let's talk about that one. But David was just making a comment as we got bumped back into the rooms about the continuously existing sandbox that people could just connect to. David, I think you're about to say something important. Is that something you're happy to share with the whole audience here, or for later?
I can share it. I think Pedro was the one that got cut off. What I said was that we can make a distinction between the hackathon type of environments that are for an event that are short-lived and have a specific audience purpose for a given audience, right? Versus the foundation's long-running sandbox that might have to serve multiple purposes. And so I was just making a distinction between those two instead of just calling it, the hackathon or the whatever sandbox, because this isn't really all sandboxes, right? Miniloop is a developer tool. The level 3 is really for running a switch, and the middle one is our sandbox description. And I'm just saying we should probably make the distinction between this long running sandbox for the foundation versus the a hackathon short-lived environment. That's it. So
yeah.
Just to add on to that, and I think also what was probably mostly agreed on was that it's probably all based on the AIC. So it's not like specific separate, technology or whatever stack that's being used. It's all based on the same AIC stack for those use cases.
For the hackathon as well, for the long-lived foundation one, I would say yes. For the short-lived, I think it depends on the purpose of it.
Yeah,
because that could be a skinny down version or it could be a TTK, or it could be whatever. But that I think needs a little bit more flushing out.
And I think the one thing that we did decide was that the discussion around the TTK, we have that. It's needed for dev test. It can be used for hackathons or whatever at will. So it doesn't really need anything extra. And so we sort of, to try and simplify, we've taken that one out of the discussion for the moment, because it's a bit of a given. And really all the discussion is around level 2 and what that should be and what it should look like. So Paul, I think our work is cut out. Our work is actually much more narrowed for when we can get a meeting together. It's simply to find level 2. So I feel like this is narrowed things quite a bit. And I thanks a lot, guys, because I think that's progress.
Yeah, for me, the infrastructure plans are the big win of this convening. So thank you guys for working so hard on it. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Miller, I see your comment in there. I don't know if you want to voice your thanks. And
I just think this is excellent. I mean, this reduction to what really are these 3 different modes of use this is ideal. The only question that I would ask, and it can be taken up during the workshop sessions later, was the assumption that was made during the discussion earlier was possibly the TTK was the purpose for level 2. Where does that land? Do we assume that that's really more part of the level 1 setup, or is this how does that fit into this mode? I'll say the simulation versus running of the code.
So what we said is that if you're running a hackathon and you don't need a switch and you don't want to be, and Sam made the point, actually, I think Sam clarified things for me a little bit more. Was that if you don't need a switch, if a switch is overhead, because what you're really focused on is the APIs and dealing with the APIs. But then we said, well, let's take that out of this discussion because we have it. We have it and we need it for dev test. We need it for developing Mojaloop. And so it's not really something that we don't have or unlikely to have in the future.
So we could say that the needs of the incubator hackathon might be met with a simulation environment, at least in part or part-time. And we have that. That's really a part, that's drawing on the level 1 tools for that. But that level 2, as you defined it here in the IAC world, is running the switch for a purpose, for a short-term event with the intention that it has no long life. We're going to tear it down. The POC is actually, it is production, but it's not production in the sense of a open market system. It is a closed system for the purposes of running a proof of concept or something that is expected to have longer term. Did I understand that difference between 2 and 3?
I don't think quite, no. So
okay.
So I think where so yes to what you said about the TTK. So we're just trying to simplify and narrow the conversation as to what do we need to do. Don't think there's anything we need to do with the TTK, because VJ and TTK development is happening and it's necessary, it's fundamental, right? And yeah, it's already part of level 1, but it's also its own thing and all that, right? So we just settle it. And Miguel pointed out that, you know, sometimes for a hackathon and for an incubator, sometimes you'll need a switch and other times you won't. So that's why we took it out, because if you don't need a switch, well, we've simply got the TTK and it's there. So let's talk about when you do need a switch. And then Simeon said, well, some of the people he's working with really just want what Lewis had with OSS Sandbox, my interpretation of what's basically, they just want something that they can connect to. They don't want to have to deploy or anything. So the question is, does level 2 simply need to be an operationals ask where the foundation or somebody runs and pays for the resources, or does it need to be so drop dead simple that somebody else can go and do it? Now with Google at the moment, we're doing it the other way with drop dead simple so that somebody else can run it. But I think that there's a larger need there that we just need to define. And that's really what the sandbox over. That's what the task is now, is just define level 2 outside of the TTK, because we have that. So level 2 might be TTK in some cases, or it might be this longer running thing, or it might be just some tools that somebody can start up their incubator and stuff themselves. That's what we've got to define.
Got it. Whereas 3 and 1 are pretty well obviously defined as they are. Thank you.
Exactly.
I also think it's worth mentioning that I think we should be not referring to level 2. We should be referring to use cases. We should be saying, what infrastructure does a hackathon need? Who are the people that are in the infrastructure? Okay, you're going to have DFSPs. Probably they don't need a switch. They can use the TTK. Then you might have people that want to be switch operators. Then they most likely, you need a switch so they can interface with it or add or play with the internal components. So I feel like we are getting it a little bit wrong by focusing on the levels, in my opinion, I think.
So would you say something like level 1 instead? You would say like developer, single user developer, something like that. And then you've got incubator hackathon, and then you have long running proof of concept or something like that. Or are you getting at something else? I'm sure.
I wouldn't even refer to them as levels. I would just say, this is the use case you need, and this is the infrastructure you need for it. I would rather define this by the use cases, not by levels. And I think by doing level 2, we are potentially oversimplifying things where we might be missing things. So I think we should have boxes to say, for hackathons, this is the kind of infrastructure you need. For this is what you need. So I think we should be rather have the verticality like that. I think that makes us focused, and I think it'll keep us in the right place and have the right requirements for each of those.
So then that's the output of the workshop that you want to see is a definition of, for the time now we have three things. They're not levels, but there are three things: demo dev, incubator, hackathon, and sandbox POC.
Yeah.
And you want to define what's needed for those things. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I would do, because I feel like we're oversimplifying things and trying to fit things into level 1, 2, 3, which I think is not correct. I think we should be focusing on those use cases and what do those use cases need, and putting, okay, this kind of use case needs this kind of infrastructure.
I would also add the level of effort for the person or the team implementing it or starting it to actually get that thing working, get that sandbox working, and the level of resources. So if you look at a nice table that says on one end, you have something that takes very little resources, has this functionality, and it's pretty easy to do. And then you go to the other end of the scale where you have the POC sandbox, where you can say, this is the closest to production minus production concerns. It also needs a lot of resources and it needs skills. So in the middle, you will have different levels of effort, resources, and features. And I would also add to the conversation that I still think that we do need that sandbox that's available, that is resettable. So every now and then, every Sunday, there's a reset, so people can have that self-service mechanism where they go to an endpoint that exists. They register as a participant, as a DFSP, and they just use it until it's reset. I think that's a very good idea. However, I don't think that forces us to use that as the level 2. I still think that there's a benefit of having an install mechanism for a team of developers that want to have a local in-house switch that they can share as they extend module, for example.
So really getting to the outcome that we're seeking, it's those three definitions, and then how those get used, whether we create a standing hackathon environment or not is a separate question, but we have to answer this other question first of what do we need to have in order to run one of these things. And it seems like to go to Miguel's point, if we follow the use cases, whether we're hosting the hackathon ourselves and we reset it every Sunday, or whether it's something somebody else hosts, it's the same stuff. We still have to define what do we have to bring into that environment. So that seems like maybe, is that the output we would expect from that work stream then?
Yeah,
that definition and the gap.
Yeah, and define, but it comes down to define that middle box. I'm not calling it level 2 now. All that was a useful handle.
The use case approach, right? Yeah.
Yes. So the middle use case.
Okay.
I think that might have to be broken up into more than one box, but yeah, agrees.
Okay.
And I think then I think it becomes a bit simpler, because then we might be, for the hackathon, we map TTK in there, we map the AIC in there. Oh, but the AIC is overcomplicated. Oh, can we make it a bit configurable so we can simplify it? And that means then you have more portability from an AIC perspective. And the less AIC you have in this world, the easier it is to maintain, etc. The less, the more people using it, etc.
I'm going to cut in here and say this is something I think Tom and sorry, David, perhaps we can figure out in a workshop and just finalize this going into the PI. Tom?
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's me being quiet, so you can move on.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Paul, Macon, I'll pass it to you if you want to close off this session before we go on to the final one.
Yeah, thank you, Simeon. That's the infrastructure session I thought was extremely useful. I'm going to be scheduling the meeting. Well, I said in my email earlier today, or was it yesterday? I'm going to try and schedule a meeting for probably the week after next, because next week apparently failed for most people. So I'll try for the week after next. And I think that it might be useful if Tom and David, if I could get an agenda sort of out with the pair of you before we go into that. I'll also be taking the output from this session today, clearly. With regard to Forex and settlement, there's a lot more work needing doing there. Michael, you were gathering your thoughts rising out of the Forex discussion. I'm hoping that you'll circulate some document out of that over the next few days, please.
Hope is a very valuable thing to have.
Indeed, hope springs eternal. And then I think that we're going to have to try and have another workshop, probably to move a little further on that and to bring in all of the settlement issues. On the final piece, fraud, I'm afraid that I didn't catch anything out of that. I have no idea how it went. I'll try and catch up with Greg after this meeting, and we'll see where we can go after that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your contributions. It's been extremely interesting and full of energy. So great. Thank you. Couldn't have asked for more. Thank you. And back to you, Simeon.
Thanks so much, Paul.